Attorney General. He went to the Attorney General. One thing I wanted to comment about.
So you don't think he should have followed state law? Look, every state in the country has a mandatory reporting regime for people who are dealing with children, and you're supposed to go to proper medical authorities or to the police if you think someone is being subjected to child abuse.
And that's exactly what he did. He went to the Texas Attorney General's office and he reported child abuse, which was defined by the Texas Attorney General at that time as child abuse.
Okay.
Now, one thing you mentioned about whether he disclosed
I understand that he went to Mr. Rufo and that he went to the meeting.
Dr. Haim, on June 23rd, 2023, you get a letter from the United States Department of Justice, Southern District of Texas. Probably a day probably a letter that probably ruined your whole day, right?
Well, so the agents came, this was a few hours before I was graduating from surgical residency. The ceremony was later that evening. I was meeting with my parents, my sister, I was going with my wife. And so when the agents came, I refused to speak with them. My wife had advised me to, not speak with them without an attorney present. But, we knew that it was so corrupt what they were doing that there was a certain sense of defiance. So, we kind of celebrated this new part of our life. It was kind of a hard thing to describe, but something kind of came over us.
First two sentences, this office is involved in investigation dealing with federal law violations. You are a potential target in this criminal investigation. So you didn't want to talk to these guys, listen to your wife, which was good counsel and good advice, and good that you did that, but you did go get an attorney and you got the guy sitting beside you, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Lytle, when you understood what was going on here, you contacted, just like you would as an attorney, you contacted the Southern District of Texas. You contacted the lady who signed this, the Assistant U.S. Attorney, is that right?
Yes, I did.
Tell me about that conversation.
Well, I reached out to her, as a defense attorney would always do when there's a target letter out there, because that could mean that they're going to charge the person right away. That's under department policies, that means they believe he's a putative defendant.
Yeah, normally that means they think they got a slam dunk case on this guy, right?
That's right.
Yeah, and they're gonna negotiate some guilty plea. And you reach out to her, and what'd she say? Did she know anything about the case?
She didn't know anything about the case. She had to talk to the agents, and she'd get back to me when she knew more about the
She
facts.
signed the target letter, and she didn't know what the target was about.
That's my understanding.
Well, that was great. So then you had subsequent conversations, and I understand in one of these conversations that happened after you learned she didn't know what the heck was going on, even though she signed the letter that ruined his day, the day he's graduating from medical school. You have subsequent conversations, and she says, well, maybe he isn't a target, and maybe if he'd come apologize and say, pretty please, we'd downgrade it to a misdemeanor. Is that right?
That's true. She sort of was a wink and a nod, like maybe we can pretend he's not a target. And I said that train's kind of left the station, and there's been emails with her calling him a target to me. And I said, I just can't do that, but why can't we talk about the case? And she still didn't know the facts of the case. She wanted it dead set to be interviewing Dr. Haim, which I didn't want to do that as a lawyer because I didn't want to reveal. I didn't know what she was getting at.
And so they wind up charging him with the maximum, like 10 years, I think you said, the maximum they could charge. And they were so determined to get Dr. Haim, she was so determined to get Dr. Haim, even though he didn't violate HIPAA, didn't do anything wrong, that she not only threatened him, come talk to me, apologize, say pretty please, we'll make it a misdemeanor, she also went after your wife. She also went after Dr. Haim's wife. Is that right, Mr. Lytle?
That's right. She alluded that she would not make any comments, or her agents make any comments about the background investigators for Dr. Haim's wife, as she's a new AUSA being hired, unless she became difficult. And I didn't really know what that meant, but I took it to being a retaliatory phrase, that if she's going to be involved in this, then there's going to be something that's going to come for her too.
Well, what's she supposed to do? She's a lawyer. She's married to Dr. Haim. She's not supposed to give him advice or counsel or talk to him?
This whole thing, any kind of HIPAA as a criminal case is so rare in this country. It's rarely ever prosecuted. But then in this context of this political debate going on, to come forward and charge Dr. Haim, it seemed just really out of control. It really was surprising to me to see this kind of a charge.
I think begs the question, why did they do it? Why did they do it? I mean, this seems so ridiculous. Why this behavior? Why do you think they did it, Dr. Lytle, or maybe Dr. Haim, or maybe even Ms. Sivage?
I can say that we found a lot of bias, a lot of conflicts of interest, a lot of connections to the hospital, and a closeness to these families. But at the end of the day, if there was any kind of issue, it shouldn't be handled in the criminal courts. It should be handled in the public arena, in the public debate.
Yeah. Doctor?
You know, I think that they went after me so hard in order to send a message to everyone else.
Of course they did.
Because I saw it in my residency, right? You know, the other people who thought this was awful, we actually had to meet in dark corners. We knew that we couldn't say anything publicly.
And that's the point. It's to chill anyone else from stepping forward. It's why they went and raid Mark Houck's house with all these agents. It's why they'd send multiple agents to the ATF goes into Brian Malinowski's house and he ends up getting shot. They thought he had like 6 gun violations. It's why they do it. It's to chill anyone else from coming forward. We will make life miserable for you, miserable for Ms. Sivage. We will do that because we don't want anyone else threatening the left's position. And that is the frightening thing.
And I'll say one more.
And I'll just say this and I'll let you finish. God bless you for doing it. God bless you for doing it. And Mr. Lytle for defending you. Thanks for stepping forward, having the courage to do so.
And I'll say one more thing, right? They came after me in order to make my life miserable, in order to send a message. But they came after me, right, to make my life miserable. We're going to make their life miserable. All right, that's what we're going to do.
And say, oh, I see. Dr. Haim is the arbiter of whether or not my medical records should be released and whether or not I should actually pay attention to HIPAA. Is that correct?
Yeah, so first of all, it was never under false pretenses, right? That entire allegation was incorrect. The DOJ's own evidence confirmed that.
Let me just stop you, Mr. Haim.
So when children are being mutilated
Mr.
and
Haim,
sterilized,
I'm just going to
I have a
reclaim my
doctor.
time. I actually have the time, so I'm going to reclaim my time because I have something very important to say. Look, I think privacy is critically important. It is also true that transgender children are literally 1.4% of all adolescents and teens, and they are facing a massive torrent of bullying and cruelty from Republicans, members of this committee. And when you heard Mr. Leslie say that suicide is the #1 cause of death amongst young people, what you have done and what these Republicans have done is absolutely shameful in my view, that you are continuing to go after and bully transgender children and their families who literally are doing what their doctors have told them, what they know medical research to be safe, and you want to be the arbiter of when medical information is going to be released?
The gentlelady's time has expired.
I understand. I don't believe that any American would want their medical records to be released, and I hope that my colleagues who have been with me on privacy would understand that this is a grave violation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do you have any response?
Nothing could be more untrue, right? You have people who are undergoing the mental anguish of believing that they've been born in the wrong body. What these people need are not the most powerful chemicals humans have ever discovered. What they do not need, the most radical surgeries ever invented by humans. They need people to listen to them.
Point of order.
What these doctors are doing are harming these people.
We can submit an answer.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request.
If you look at the testimony from medical societies, they indicate...
It's 0. You can't change your sex. So it's 0. So I want the record to be clear that the Biden administration targeted and prosecuted Dr. Haim and Ms. Sivage for exposing medical procedure, surgery, and pharmaceutical intervention that has a 100% failure rate. Am I correct, Dr. Haim?
That is exactly correct.
Dr. Haim, you have exposed the fact that medical providers were providing dangerous and illegal treatments to minors. And both the Biden White House and the activists who are actually running the show behind the scenes didn't like what you were exposing. Isn't that also correct?
That's correct.
And do you think that their subsequent federal pressure was brought to bear on you was that merely a coincidence, or was it to try to stop you from exposing what they were doing?
It was in order to prevent me from exposing what they were doing and to silence other whistleblowers.
Okay. Ms. Sivage, what is gender dysphoria? And I ask that question because I'm a pretty well-educated person and pretty well-read person. This is something that we didn't even really know about or talk about 3 or 4 years ago. What is this?
Gender dysphoria is when a child is confused about their birth identity. And that the key there is the confusion, because the problem is not in the physical body of the child. The problem is in their mind. And so why are we pushing as a society a solution that will irreversibly harm and sterilize children's bodies when truly the problem is that they're confused about their birth identity in their mind? And so part of what I've done here and part of why we're here today is to affirm and to celebrate ultimately God's design for our gender and sexuality, and that is something that should be defended.
Well, are there industries that stand to benefit financially from these procedures, these industries?
I refer to them as the unholy trinity, which is the healthcare insurance companies, the pharmaceutical industry, and the hospital system. And all three of these institutions have much to gain because this is a highly lucrative industry that exploits the vulnerabilities of children.
Why don't you explain that a little bit further?
Well, in my case, I came forward to expose Medicaid fraud, and I saw firsthand how Texas Children's Hospital was illegally utilizing Texas Medicaid to fund quote-unquote gender-affirming care, which is really gender-denying care. And the taxpayers were billed for this, and that is illegal in the state of Texas. And so this benefited the pharmaceutical industry because the child is put down a path of medicalization, making them a medical patient for life. So the pharmaceutical industry has a vested interest in making sure that a child is initiated down this irreversible path.
Dr. Haim, sex change hormones and puberty blockers are presented to patients and their parents as life-saving treatment. What is the reality and effects these treatments actually have on children?
The reality is that what they're telling them is the opposite of the truth. These hormones, the blockers, the surgeries will put them down a path that they can never come back from. You know, they always say that it's reversible, but once you start changing your physiology from the inside out, right, because that's what these hormones do. They change the cellular architecture of every single cell in your body in a way that you can't take back. And, you know, it takes a while for the physical changes to develop. But once they happen, there's no going back.
Okay, and so again, you've got lifelong patients as a result of these interventions.
Yeah, and you know, they were saying that, you know, suicide rates have gone up. You know, is it any wonder that the suicide rates have gone up, but also the society, you know, convincing people that they're born in the wrong body? That, you know, the way they were created was a mistake, that the name their parents gave them is their dead name. Of course the suicide rates are going up, and it's exactly because of what these people call quote-unquote gender-affirming care. But what it really is the destruction of the self.
It's a pretty cruel industry as far as I can tell. I have a lot more questions I'd love to engage in with all of you. Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for your bravery, and thank you for being here. That I yield back.
Is that what your testimony is?
Yeah.
So the suicide rate is not going up because there are people like you who are telling them that they must be mistaken if they feel something different than what you think they should.
That question was a little worded. Can you clarify it?
Sure, because it relates, I think, to Mrs. Savage as well. It's pretty remarkable to hear that the reason why the suicide rate in the transgender community is so much higher than other communities is somehow because these innocent kids who don't want any of this gender-affirming care, who don't go to their parents and talk at length about how they're feeling, and instead are, through their parents, controlled by some transgender industrial complex to convince transgender people that no, even though unquestionably your life would be so much simpler if you just carried on as you are, because you wouldn't be the subject of a hearing in a subcommittee based on one case. It's pretty shocking to me that that actually is the rationale, but it does clarify a lot for me because I wonder, you talk about the actual care and the impact that it has on these children. Is it your testimony here today that the doctors who provide that care to the children don't know what the impact that it has on the kids?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, it's not care because what they're doing is harming the patients. And That's exactly what I would say. The doctors who are doing this are misinformed about what they're doing. They don't understand the pathology they're treating, because gender dysphoria is a problem of the mind, but they're using solutions of the body. That is where you're wrong.
And so it's a dysphoria of the mind, so psychiatric care is what they need.
I believe, yeah.
Maybe conversion therapy?
Excuse me?
Conversion therapy, maybe?
What do you mean by conversion therapy?
Well,
I would say
you seem to know everything about the medical field. I'm sure you understand.
Well, I would say conversion therapy is using hormones,
it was a
blockers,
rhetorical
and surgery
question, sir, and I'll reclaim my time.
Falsely
Let me ask you a little bit
create
about the
someone into the opposite
process.
sex.
I'm sorry, I only have 5 minutes. Let me ask you a little bit about the process. Now, I heard your testimony earlier to be that you saw this happening, and I'm not going to get into the details as to what the Texas Children's Hospital represented it was doing or not doing. They clearly say they never had anything secretive. They were following the law. But you felt like you had come upon something that was very damaging to child patients. And obviously you're aware of HIPAA. And I assume you're aware of, as a medical doctor, what your obligations are to report anything you see as child abuse or something similar through a particular chain. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And I know you testified and you said that you saw one example or a couple examples of parents who had abused children be allowed in their hospital rooms. And so therefore, even though you knew that you should go to Child Protective Services, you decided unilaterally that it would be worthless, so you weren't going to follow the proper procedures. Is that right?
Yes, CPS had proven ineffective to protect children.
Proven to who?
To me.
To you, I see. So you get to put your own judgment in instead of the parents, instead of Child Protective Services, instead of the government. Whatever you think you get to do, well, they're not going to be good, so I'm going to go to a journalist. And now you're trying to call yourself a whistleblower. But let me ask you, you said something else that I found interesting. Or maybe it was Mr. Lytle. Before you went to Mr. Rufo with this information, did you try to reach out to the Texas Attorney General?
Yes, sir.
That's Ken Paxton, right? Mm-hmm. Who has been leading the charge against gender-affirming care, correct?
Yeah.
I have an article here that you wrote in January of 2024 to defend yourself. You don't say anywhere in here that you tried to reach out to the Texas Attorney General.
Yeah.
So which is true, the article or what you're testifying to here today?
I'm testifying here today that we reached out to Ken Paxton's office before the story was released in May of 2023.
And you didn't hear back?
No.
I have a unanimous consent request. I'd like to introduce this article written by Eithan Haim here, not on my watch, it's Eye on the News, the Social Order Healthcare, dated January 12th, 2024.
Without objection. I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes. We had, as I mentioned earlier, a witness last year named Chloe Cole, I've become friends with and come to know, who testified here. She's one example of many of people that I've met and come to know through her and through others. And in testimony, this is similar testimony, it wasn't the exact testimony she gave here. She mentioned that she's a detransitioned 18-year-old woman, now this is older, this is like last year, from California who went through the process of medical transition between the ages of 12 and 16. And then she goes through and describes how it happened, and how she was pushed by social media and how she was pushed by medical personnel to go down that road. And then she goes through and explains, because this is relevant. I'm going to ask a question about what Children's Hospital was up to in Texas. She said, quote, "I've suffered a multitude of complications from the blockers, from the cross-sex hormones, and the surgery." She had a double mastectomy. "My quality of life is still being impacted to this day. I had my puberty blocked when I was already about 4 years in. So I started experiencing some menopause-like symptoms, severe hot flashes and itching all over my body. This went away after I stopped taking them, but I still have joint pains and shooting pains in my spine. During a consultation for testosterone, I was told by my endocrinologist that I would experience vaginal atrophy. I was not informed that this atrophy actually affects the rest of the organs in the pelvic region. She goes to explain more, that she would be unable to breastfeed. It's horrific. It's absolutely horrific. What I want to point out is I heard one of my colleagues said on the other side of the aisle, I think he was asking you, Dr. Haim, about whether or not Children's Hospital was engaging in surgery. And I want to just stick real quick to your allegation that Children's Hospital was continuing to engage in puberty blockers even after what was happening on with Texas with respect to the law in Texas.
Oh, yeah, I mean, they were absolutely doing the surgeries after they said they were not doing
They were doing puberty blockers and surgeries.
Well, the puberty blockers are surgeries.
Okay, right.
To implant the devices into the child.
And that was absolutely happening. That's your testimony.
Absolutely. There's evidence of that.
And